The sun is now setting over the empty monastery, so full of graces lingering in the air. Here, I remember one day, the abbot, when I was making my simple vows in his hand, had me before him, kneeling before him in church, as he sat on his abbot's throne, and he had his mitre on, and after signing the vows, he said a few things, one of which was this: you will study, you will be a priest. And those words, coming from authority, came straight through the clouds of heaven. It's at this very spot on the grass there that I had decided to become a Premonstratensian while reading the book that the novice master gave me when I was in retreat. It warmed my heart. I saw what the power of contemplative priesthood was. And here, much devotion to the Blessed Virgin would happen at the grotto, and all night sometimes on first Saturdays. And I remember how, not long after that moment of making the vows, must have been the 8th of December 1993, I think, yes, that would make sense. He, not long afterwards, called me aside and said, "We're sending you to Rome." I remember going up to him and putting my arms around him and said how glad I was, how moved I was. And then I remember, as he was sending me away, he said, "Have you a typewriter?" I said, "No." "Well, here's one." And he gave me a brand new one, which was in those days fairly modern. It had electric gadgets to help you, including a bit of a memory. And I said, "Father Abbot, you're an angel." And he calmly said, "We try to be. We try to be." So he was kind, and he would always write when I was in Rome. He was good, keeping in touch and encouraging me to do the topic that I wanted to do for research. It's actually when he ceased to be abbot that things became a bit unstuck. But there were others too in the house who were holy men. My junior master at the time was dear Father Oliver, and he was very good to us. He was the one who got so much moving in the house with regard to Marian devotions, all-night vigils. He had contacts all over Ireland, and he was big into what moved things. He knew how to use people who were good at organizing and were into prayer big time. So things would happen as a result of his being prior. The second in command is often very important in the running of things. He was also the cantor and a man of God. And I remember saying to myself, if I can be as holy as Father Oliver, I'll be happy to be here forever. He was kind, and you can see that in his face. And he was a very good preacher. He would preach every day, and he would really go into mode, especially in the evening mass when he had a lot of people in church. I remember him coming out with things like this: "What you could do with some exorcism in the Doyle." Yes, anyway, that's another story. But he was good at saying things as they were, and he got things to move, as I say. I mean, by the thousand. And so, these were the days of studying quietly. And those were quiet days because there weren't modern gadgets. The cell was simple, and one heard the silence, and books would go into the mind. The morning was given over to study, and it was very quiet. Much was learnt in those days. The cell was simple, but grace-filled. And then, after they sent me to Rome, of course, I'd be living with the Premonstratensians. And we had in Rome, as in Kilnacloth, a lot of adoration, a lot of Eucharistic worship. And I remember being taught from the beginning to have a holy hour every day, which the Americans had also, the daily holy hour before the Blessed Sacrament, which I kept also even if I wasn't in the house, insisting, for instance, if I was at home, to go to the convent to do an hour. And they knew that. They'd leave me for an hour before the Blessed Sacrament in the convent. So these things matter. And they're still ingrained in the system. Every day, a holy hour before the Blessed Sacrament until death. And I remember then getting to Rome, and the liturgy was very good there. People commented that it was probably the best liturgy in Rome, with the possible exception of St. Anselmo. But even there, things were a bit dispersed because they would go into linguistic groups, whereas we were all together, and we had a lot of Gregorian chant, and very well done, a lot of organ music. The office was very well chanted, not only the Mass itself, but other offices. It was very well done. And then we were all called regularly to choir by the bell. And one day, the young brother who was responsible for the bell came up to me because he had to go away or out or something for a while, and he said, "Posso chiederti un favore? May I ask you a favour?" "Yes, what's the problem?" And then it was simply this: "In my absence, could you be responsible for the bell?" Okay. Then I thought, that's actually only a small thing, but it's important, because one moves the whole house and makes sure the Lord is honoured at the right time. Back to base, back to base, back to base. And so I quietly sat there in my cell in Rome and wrote this on the importance of rhythming time, punctuating the phrase of life, back to where we belong. Pray without ceasing. Make sure that time is in order and not off the rails and out of control. The button actually was very close to my cell in Rome to ring the big bell, that is the electric noise which woke everybody up and took everyone back to choir several times a day. A button that is pushed and pushed again, and yet again, where moments bid all halt upon this line. A little pain that blasts the tranquil ear, where thoughts are hid, 'neath pillows and 'neath tomes and papers dense, with meaning and with gleaning of much weight that must needs enter in. A pulling thence of all in gentle pressure, never late. This is my thumb's small duty. This is all I have to think to do. Yet think I must. For though a little thing be this my call, it is enough that all one man in trust, with duty that moves all, for one to be fidel, fidel, unchanged fidelity. And unchanged fidelity was to be seen also in others in the ambit of this place. And one in particular comes to mind. It's Paddy Caldwell, who had come around 1921 to the monastery and worked for it ever since. He never married. He gave his whole life to serving the monastery. Actually, is that date correct? I'm not sure. Maybe that's too early. Or maybe, I think actually what it was, he was 21, that's what it was. So all his life he worked for the abbey, because the abbey itself didn't start to exist until, I think, after the war. But they tried in the 20s. There was a long pre-story, and I forget the details. He knew it all, and that's the point. He knew the whole story. I think one house in the country had tried to start it, and it hadn't worked, and another house took it off. It did work. That was Tongoloo. I think perhaps for the reasons of the war, precisely. Anyway, what it was, that this man was a mine of history. He'd known all the story of the house, and he was getting on for 90 by the end. He was still there living, and right at the end he had the tiniest moment of nursing care outside the monastery, but he actually came back straight away to the monastery. We were actually nursing him on a daily basis, and in the monastery while he was with us. He was in the same corridor upstairs. And remember the abbot then, when he actually did die, he petered out, and then he came back to the monastery in the coffin, and the abbot at the entrance to the cloister welcomed the coffin and said, "Paddy, welcome home." Now, we actually had a very moving funeral, because during the Holy Mass itself, right at the end, just before we put him in the ground, they played a recording of his voice, and it was as though he was coming from beyond the grave to talk to us, time coming back over the centuries, as it were, because he was the memory of the community, even though he wasn't a monk, and his mind was alert till the end. In fact, I remember him one time, I was helping him and nursing him then, and it was coming up to the 8th of December, and he said, "Tomorrow it's the 7th of December. He said, "Oh yes," he said, "St. Ambrose." He knew all these feasts without my telling him. But there were stories about Paddy Caldwell, because he was quite a phenomenon. He would never stop praying. He was in church for hours. He was praying and praying and praying away, and he would pray aloud quite often. You could actually hear what he was praying. I remember things that would go on. There was a novice master at one time. He wasn't novice master, I was there, but I knew him well. He was coming into church one time. It was Christmas Eve, I think, or Christmas night. There he was, and Paddy was at the crib. He was at the crib praying away, and you could hear what he was saying. They used to call him actually Paddy, pray for us, Paddy, pray for us. So anyway, there he was. "Oh, St. Joseph, pray for us. Oh, Blessed Virgin, pray for us. Oh, holy shepherds, pray for us. Oh, holy kings, pray for us." And then the novice master came in and heard this going on and said, "Oh, holy cow, pray for us." And he went away. Anyway, that was Paddy. Not that he said that, novice master said it. And so anyway, Paddy went on, and I thought to myself, with him went a lot of history. Do you know that actually, way back in the 50s, I think, he managed to go all the way to Rome. He got a little bit of help this and there from people around the area, and managed to use whatever means he could get to Rome on pilgrimage, and that was quite an effort in the 50s from the poor island of that time. That was Paddy, a phenomenon. But let's not forget these hidden saints, for Ireland was full of hidden saints who never made a noise. They never enthroned themselves on the screens of this world or got into the social media. But they made it, and they made good use of time, praying a lot and just quietly loving God and the Blessed Virgin in their own undramatic way. We can learn a lot from history, and it's good to have roots, the strong, deep roots of Ireland, which, alas, Ireland itself right now is managing very well to cut off and sow. This then is the tree that they must have planted in memory of Paddy Caldwell, who was associated with the Norbertine community Here we are. It was actually from 1924 to 1994. There we are. That's what, because that was the first foundation. That's right. It was. There's a long story, and the present building is only about the 50s. But they used the old manor house before, and he knew the whole story. It was Churna, or one of these other houses in Eastern Europe, when actually started, and it didn't work, and then the Tongaloo took it over, and that did work. So Paddy was received yes, he got the Benemerenti from the Pope, and he died on the 12th of January 1994, age 90, that's right. Age 90 years, requiescat in pace. Ego sum resurrectio et vita, qui credit in me, et siam si mortuus fuveri et vivet, et omnes qui vivit et credit in me, non morietur in aeternum. Requiem aeternam dona eis Domine, et lux perpetua lucia Deis, requiescant in pace. Amen. Confugimus sancta Dei genetrix nostras deprecationes ne despicias in necessitatibus nostris sera periculis contis libera nos semper Virgo gloriosa et benedicta, Domina nostra, mediatrix nostra, advocata nostra, tuo Filio nos reconcilia, tuo Filio nos commenda, tuo Filio nos